Hey yo, what's good though? Saul here, and welcome back to my story mode. So before we get started with this conversation, it should be known that we have had a very similar conversation hundreds of times in the past already. Anybody that's been following me on this channel long enough, or that just knows my personal history with Pokemon, knows that one of my biggest problems with this franchise is that it still consistently treats us like children. Now, don't get anything twisted, I am fully 100% aware that their primary target audience is a younger audience, children. That's where the money has always been, that's where they've been receiving all the money that they have, and there is absolutely no reason to break that formula. Or at the very least, that's where a majority of their money was coming from. And don't get me wrong, there's still a very fat stack coming in from the kids that are buying Pokemon related merch and games and things along those lines. So naturally, of course, the games always make sure to reflect the audience that it's made for. You will always play as a 10-year-old child that is going out on their first adventure to be the very best. On top of this, the games will always do their damnedest to make sure that it's accommodating to every single one of its new players. Which, to an extent, I completely understand. When a big franchise is introducing a new shiny game, it's bound to attract a bunch of newcomers that want to get into the series or franchise for the very first time, and there's no guarantee that they're coming in with any prior knowledge. So it needs to be addressed that they need to be accommodated for, which is why there will always be a semblance of a battle tutorial, a capture tutorial, and a tour guide through your first time in a Pokemon Center or a shop of any kind. And now here we are in the biggest era of gaming, and developers seem to have taken note that we are the biggest crowd out there, by and far. Maybe not the biggest, but you know, that's an exaggeration, you get what I'm getting at. And so new crowds from all over the place start to pour in, and Pokemon decides to make even more accommodations for newer players, practically streamlining the hell out of pretty much any major release so that anybody and everybody can get into it at the ease of a button press. So I think we all get where I'm going with this, right? You've seen the title and you've seen the thumbnail. As I stated a moment ago, my biggest gripe with this series is how we're treated like children every single game. And I feel like that would be less of an issue if they actually found a way to, I don't know, maybe strike a bit of a balance between new and old players. I have been playing these games for the better part of 20 years, and now all of a sudden, at my big age, they feel the need now to tell me what's super effective against what. Very interesting. You can call me an old head all you want after I say this, but back in my day, learning what was super effective against what was something that was learned and earned through trial and error. I would even say it could be rewarded to you if you go out of your way to talk to NPCs that might have that information to teach you. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, an art that was lost to the streamlining of this franchise. And that is precisely what we're here to talk about today. It had to have been well over a month ago by now, but longtime viewer and homie Rock Owl Gamer asked on one of my previous videos if there was a possible chance of me making a video talking about how Pokemon could be more grown up, how it could appeal to adults as well. Or I guess more specifically in this case, what I would do to appeal to an older audience. At first I figured, we've talked about something like this enough, I feel like everybody's gotten the general gist of how I feel about this. But then I realized after looking back on all my videos, we've never truly had a dedicated discussion to this specific topic. So I figured, hey, you know what? We're still in the downtime for Pokemon Legends ZA, and it's gonna be a minute before we hear about that, so why the hell not? Let's go ahead and have this actual dedicated discussion video on this topic. And so, you guys already know the deal by now. Go ahead and grab yourself a snack or a meal, maybe a thing of sushi, and maybe go ahead and grab some milk to dip that in, and let's go ahead and discuss some of the ways that I personally would make it so that Pokemon can appeal to both younger and older audiences. Warning to people who already know me, a couple of these things might be a little repetitive, and I'm sorry, but these are things that I feel would make a very large difference in appealing to both younger and older audiences, so bear with me for a bit. The first thing that I would absolutely slam down on the table here is more accessible customization. As I've stated time and time again over the course of these last couple of years, customization is one of the most important things that they ever could have introduced to this franchise. The transition to 3D back in 6th gen made it so that these models and characters were a lot more detailed. Long gone were the days of sprites from a top-down perspective that we could barely get any details out of. And for a franchise that heavily advertised for its games that you were going to go on your own unique adventure with your own unique style and partners, it was about high time they really delved into the customization aspect. And for a time, they did manage to do that, albeit a little more on the limited side. Every new mainline generational game that we would receive, based on the region that we were in, we would get an abundance of different styles of clothing that we could utilize for our character, which was now decoratable. It was already pretty revolutionary that we got to change our skin color, but we're also getting to change our outfits and hats and style too? Oh my goodness, almost like a fever dream. This continued and improved all the way up to Pokemon Sword and Shield, where we had our biggest pile yet. We were now at the point where we could not only change our hairstyle and color, but we were also able to change our contact lenses so that we could have different eye styles. That's crazy, man. Now, I don't think I need to explain to you guys what happened after that. Essentially, it was all downhill from there. Now, don't get me wrong, I will admit that it is nice that right from the get-go in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we're actually able to change our eye styles, our face shapes, and things like that. However, pretty much any and all forms of customization after that are absolutely nothing. Now, it is possible that this is very biased because it's coming from a grown black man that is frustrated with most of gaming for not yet realizing that we have more than 2 hairstyles. But now it is worse than ever because I literally looked like every single other black guy that ever played Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and actually went out of their way to decorate their character. This is a very frustrating aspect that I refuse to ignore going forward. There is absolutely no reason as to why these games should not be at their highest high when it comes to customization at this point. You guys have heard me say it time and time again. I do completely understand why they had us wear uniforms in Scarlet and Violet, but I feel like there was absolutely no reason as to why we had to limit how we wore those uniforms. Let me get something of a puffy overcoat. Let me get a neat little armband or something like that that I can wear. Hell, I think the most important aspect is that we should absolutely be able to separate the pants or shorts that we wear with whatever tops or coats that we decide to wear. Now, of course, clothing is a very important aspect when I mention the word customization. This also heavily applies to accessories as well. Maybe I want to wear a couple of rings, maybe a couple of wristbands, maybe I want to wear a sick necklace. Hell, if I buy a shirt, why can't I go ahead and dye it somewhere? If the shirt's available to everybody, maybe I want to dye it a specific color, or maybe I want to make it tie-dye. I'm just saying, man, there are so many ways that people like to decorate themselves because that is how they express themselves. However, though, when I say the word customization, this does not only apply to clothing. I am fully aware of the fact that I am definitely a huskier gentleman. There's also the critical fact that I am not 10 years old anymore. I have not been for a very long time. So why can't we make a couple of accommodations to be able to showcase that? I want to play as me. It's always just so funny to me when characters like Nemona completely tower you when I know that in reality, I absolutely look down at her from the clouds, man. I'm just saying that by now, I definitely would have made a couple of touch-ups in that arena in some way, shape, or form. At the very least, I would definitely change up a couple of things to make it so that the game doesn't always reinforce the idea that you are a child, you are a baby that can't do anything on your own. For example, me personally, if I were starting off Scarlet and Violet, I would have preferred it so that we started off at the dorms already. A well-established schoolgoer that actually attends class with people their own actual age. Why is it that they're like literal infants in these classrooms with grown people like Nemona? It's crazy. And obviously, I would definitely make it so that there's a lot of dialogue changes so that I'm never referred to as kid or child or anything like that. Hell, this might be a little crazy, but I think I would love to have a scenario in which a Pokemart gets robbed that you're working at and the Pokemon professor is actually shopping there. You could go through the motions of receiving a Pokemon and battling your way through your first battle that way. That's for sure like an excessive vision, but you get what I'm getting at. There's a lot of different ways to start a Pokemon game than waking up in your room at your mom's house. I'm just putting it out there, bro. We could absolutely take a couple of notes from Pokemon Coliseum. Also, in a couple of videos here and there, I mentioned the possibility of maybe our player character having something of a reputation based on how you treat people and how you respond to people. I have a whole section about this, so we'll get to that soon, but just know I think that that's also a very important aspect of customization. Before we tackle that subject, I want to talk about the subject of having more mature themes. Now, of course, Pokemon has done okay with the idea of a couple of mature themes here and there, depending on the game that you look at. Our most recent example being Arven's entire story, a theme of abandonment. As simple and straightforward as it is, I still think that Arven's character is woven together pretty nicely considering the fact of what he's been through. It's completely understandable after you go through his story as to why he's a dickhead to you and your dog when you first meet. I'm no therapist or anything like that, but as an educated guess, I feel like I too would probably have some serious trust issues if my parents up and abandoned me too. I too would go out of my way to do everything in my power to make sure that my Mabstiff was staying alive because I love that damn thing. I totally get his perspective. And that is exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about. I don't think that we need to be afraid to tackle more important themes like this one. Now, of course, I'm not going to speak for everybody on this situation. However, I definitely find myself a lot more attached to stories and characters when I find them a little more relatable. So it's no mystery as to why a character like Arven struck a chord with me and a lot of other players. Of course, there's a lot of other themes that I would love to tackle that I haven't seen as much as I would like to in this franchise. I would love for us to have a story that visits the idea of power and corruption, where the top percent is really taking advantage of what that region has to offer, and it's up to somebody like the player to help really change the hierarchy a little bit. I feel like we don't really get the chance to visit themes that are a little more intense, like sacrifice or loss of innocence and things like that. Don't get me wrong, we do sometimes, but it is very hidden within subtext. And that's another one of those things where I would definitely want to put a little more up front and center. Not make it too obvious, of course, but definitely visit the idea in a more direct way. I don't know, call me crazy if you want, but I just really feel like a lot of character and story writing within Pokemon could absolutely benefit from visiting darker themes. Now, this next aspect I waited to talk about because the last two things that I mentioned here kind of play into this one. Time and time again, I have talked about the fact that while I do love Pokemon for what it is, it does feel like we could benefit more from people actually actively having their own unique adventures. Now, don't get me wrong, Pokemon and plenty of other RPGs have been doing just fine handling things the way they have been. However, I just feel like with Pokemon, it's more strange than ever to have these awkward limitations. In a game like Pokemon, where we're all supposed to be our own unique people with our own unique teams and we have our own unique experiences, why is it that the experiences don't feel as unique as they could be? Why is it that it feels like the few times where I do get the choice to actually say or do something, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of anything because it's just going to lead back to the same line of dialogue or the same action that's going to take place next anyways? I don't think I need to explain any further because you guys already get where I'm going with this. I definitely want to have choices, and I want to have those choices have consequences. Me personally, I would love to develop a Pokemon game where everything you do and say actually has an effect on people around you as well as the world itself. If I decide not to help out the Pokemon professor that's randomly getting mauled by a Pokemon, I definitely think if he ends up in the hospital, he would not want to give me my Pokemon, so I'd have to find another way to get my Pokemon. Maybe I'm chasing down an evil team or something like that and they end up in a really tall tower that the police have blocked off. I could find a way to get the police out of my way, go to do something else entirely, or I can just fight the police and barge right past them. Or hell, scenario 4, if I decided to go out of my way and do the gym challenge and I come back to this particular spot, I can show off my badges and showcase, hey, I'm a capable trainer, maybe I can actually help you guys. Now, these particular scenarios are not well thought out at all. I thought about them in the last like 30 seconds or so. But this right here is exactly what I meant by playing into the customization a little bit more. I want to develop my own character and have it so that the world and the people around me react to me based on what I do, what I choose to do. Trust me, I get that this one is definitely a little more on the overzealous side. This one is definitely more of a pipe dream that would never ever happen, but we're talking about what I would do. And this is one of the many ways that I would absolutely make it so that older audiences actually feel like they have options. Telltale games, for example, are so appealing because of how many options you have in those scenarios. The specific actions that you take and how you respond to people will heavily affect your future playthrough. And that is the kind of situation I would love love for something like Pokemon. I would want to have it so that when a game like that releases, after me and my homies finish said game, we can have an in-depth discussion on how all of our different paths branched. Oh yeah, when I lost to my rival, he actually got really cocky and challenged one of the evil heads of this organization only to lose really badly. Oh, really? Because I actually beat him and he took his time to really reorganize his team a bit and we actually fought that guy together. Well, that's interesting because I completely ignored that fight and he was so disrespected that he ended up actually joining the evil organization. And that right there is how one develops a unique adventure for every player, because nobody, when there's options available, will have the same experience. Not exactly. And this is also another way to play into more mature themes, because making the world our oyster and making it so that people actually react to the things we do and actually giving us some consequences makes it so that we could learn a lesson or two about how these characters are, what they've been through, and why they react the way that they do. Knowing a character's history will definitely influence what you say to them. And I just feel like that's so critical to writing that it could easily play into a lot of unique themes and things like that if we were to do something like that. Moving on to the next thing, this one's definitely on the shorter side because we've talked about this plenty of times, but just giving us difficulty options is something I would do. There is absolutely zero reason as to why I can't play on a harder difficulty. Why the hell not? If I want to be able to fight gym leaders that have full teams that are decked out with insane loadouts, then let me suffer the way I want to suffer. I don't know. I think this is just kind of a standard by now, because most games this day and age will ask you, hey, you want to play on easy and enjoy the story? Go ahead. You want to play on normal and, you know, have a balance between story and difficulty? Sure. You want to play on hard and actually have to work for your story? That's totally awesome. I feel like this can play into a lot of Nintendo related stuff, but that's not the discussion for this channel. Regardless, I don't think I really need to explain myself too much on that one. I feel like that's kind of obvious. Now, this last one is very important because this is absolutely something that can and should be done, and hopefully it's done soon. And that is trusting the players. Like I mentioned basically at the beginning of this video, there was a point in time where it wasn't as obvious as to what was super effective against what. There were times where it took trial and error to figure out if this type was weak to this type, how this move worked, how this and that did this and that. There were a time where puzzles actually took some genuine thought. I can't imagine having another actual puzzle like we had in the 8th gym in 3rd generation. Now we have rhythm games for some reason. Very interesting. And I don't really think that I need to say anything about tutorials, right? Game Freak. There are times when the player wants to be able to figure things out for themselves. I, as a longtime player of Pokemon, am well past that point. If I feel like I don't really need a tutorial or a reminder on how to catch Pokemon, I think it's safe to trust that I don't really think that I need that. If you're gonna develop a puzzle for a cave system or something like that that we actually need to put some thought into, don't wuss out. Make it a puzzle. Make it so that we have to actually think a little bit, and so we're more rewarded when we actually get through the puzzle. And it is absolutely more than okay to make it so that challenges are a little bit on the harder side. Whatever they happen to be, it's okay to make us work for them. And, you know, of course, actually put some effort and thought into making the puzzles themselves. We don't need another Paper Mario Origami King situation. But as everybody has been saying for years upon years upon years now, we don't need to have our hands held for every single situation. Even with newer players, after the initial introductions and tutorials, you have to be able to trust at some point that they'll be able to get through things on their own. There was a time where it did feel like you guys trusted your players a little bit. The internet was not popping like that when Pokemon was first a thing, so we had to find a way on our own to get that old man off the street so that we could get to the next route. If we were getting our asses handed to us, whether it be by our rival Blue or by gym leaders, then we would have to figure out on our own that it would probably be beneficial to go train on our own, get our Pokemon leveled up, because that is the point of wild Pokemon. Please trust that we are not just going to drop the game and drop the franchise if we are not told exactly what to do and how to do it. Please believe me, because I'm telling you right now, if I bought that game, it is way too expensive for me to just never look at again. I promise you. And so, with all that being said, I think that I've said my piece about this. Like I stated earlier, I fully understand that they are appealing to a very specific market, that market being a younger audience. However, there has to be a point or a time where they finally realize that a lot of the kids that played these games growing up are still very much playing these games as grown-ups, and that there is a for sure way to better strike a balance between new and old players, between young and old players. I love this franchise, and I probably always will, no matter how frustrated I get with it sometimes. But just like many others, I too can get frustrated when I'm told I am only this specific thing and I can only do these specific things. Especially when the world has so many different unique things that you can approach in different and unique ways. Or at least you wish you can. So maybe one day I do hope that they go out of their way to acknowledge the people that have been playing these games for their entire lives, because we're still here. We're still enjoying these games, but we feel like there is still just so much potential and it's still being squandered for whatever reason. Will we ever truly get that Pokemon game that tackles mature themes and lets us make our own choices and actually have consequences for those choices? I don't know, but I'm telling you right now, I'm not gonna hold my breath on it. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about wraps it up for this one here. I looked at that comment from a while back and I was like, you know what, it's time to make this, because there's absolutely no reason as to why we haven't. And I could easily talk about this all day, but I did not want to make like a 2-3 hour long video talking about every single change and every detail that I would write out, because I could easily do that, but man, it would take forever to edit, and I have a couple of channels to work on now, so I'm not going to do that to myself. But regardless, I'm obviously going to be passing the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you like what I've presented here? Do you think that Pokemon could absolutely appeal to a more mature audience by making a couple of these changes, and these changes would actually work out for the better? Or do you think that I'm completely off? Pokemon is fine as is. It does not need to appeal to anybody else but the younger audience, and we're just going to have to stick it out if we really want this series to continue it regardless. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just so. I would like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor, taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!